Shalom, and welcome to another show of GMS Collage, giving all praises to Yahweh Ba'Shem Yahushai. Also giving double honors to the elders who rule well, who have taken the time to teach us the tools of how to get the word out, and salutations to you other brothers who are out there teaching the word in sincerity and truth also. I got another article here from the Patriot Ledger. Again, it's a local paper, but news is news in my eyes. You brothers can take the information and do a little bit more research yourselves. But I like doing this because it gives a perspective of the people in this area. All right. So I got an article here. I guess the writer is Jessica Trufant, who is a writer from the Patriot Ledger. She speaks about Stephen Lynch, who is a Republican who is in the House of Representatives. He's a representative of Boston. So this was his take on what was going on in Ukraine and Russia and Crimea. What's going on all over there in that area. This is his take on it. All right, it says, the title of the article says, "In Ukraine, Lynch voices strong concern." All right. It says, U.S. Representative Stephen Lynch is warning the tensions between Moscow and the West could quickly escalate if Russia continues to violate Ukraine's territorial integrity, breaking a long-standing political pact between the world's nuclear powers. All right. It says, in a phone interview Sunday from Kiev, the capital city of Ukraine, Lynch, a South Boston Democrat, said the Russians are a party to the 1994 Budapest Agreement, in which Ukraine gave up its nuclear weapons stockpile for guaranteed sovereignty and security. He said Russia's recent annexation of the Ukrainian peninsula Crimea, and annexation is just when you acquire some kind of land, when you take over a land. That's what annexation is, for lack of a more specific definition. You brothers can look it up. It says Russia's recent annexation of the Ukrainian peninsula Crimea is in breach of that agreement, which Moscow was further threatened with a strong military presence on the Ukrainian border. And it says here in quotes, "Now we're at the brink of war if things were to spiral out of control." Lynch said of the boiling tensions, it's not just the relationship between Russia and the United States in the balance, it's the state of the world. So so this is the beginning of World War III. So it's you ever boil a pot of water, you'll see those little small bubbles popping up from the bottom of the pot. That's what it's not a complete boil where you see the big bubbles on top of the water, but it's just those small little white bubbles that are at the bottom of the pot. And that's what's going on now with these tensions over there in Russia, with them taking over Crimea. All right. It says a senior member of the House Subcommittee on National Security, Lynch is part of a congressional mission that has stopped in Ukraine after making stops in Afghanistan, Israel, and Palestine. Led by members of the Senate Armed Services Committee, the delegation was supposed to visit Iraq, but New Hampshire Senator Kelly Ayotte, I'm not sure how to pronounce it, instead suggested meeting with government officials and Democratic opposition leaders in Ukraine. Russia's seizure of Crimea, where a majority of the residents are ethnic Russians, came after the ousting of Ukraine's Russian-backed president Viktor Yanukovych last month, triggering the worst confrontation between the East and the West since the Cold War. So the Lord has made it so that even though the so-called Cold War was over, now that same tension, that same energy between the two nuclear powers, which is the United States and Russia, is being increased again. All right. It says Russia refuses to acknowledge Ukraine's interim prime minister, Arseniy Yatsenyuk. I don't know how to pronounce it. It's a Russian name. Or an election slated for late May. "I think we should be very concerned, but at the same time, they have not asked for U.S. boots on the ground, nor have they asked for NATO to come in," Lynch said following talks with Yatsenyuk, and other leaders. Lynch said the Ukrainians are most concerned about security as Russia has undertaken massive troop movements to the country's border, raising anxieties about a potential invasion. While Russian leaders have called the movement a military exercise, Lynch said American leaders are skeptical. In my opinion, the number of troops looks more like an invasion than a military exercise, he said. So it's almost as though Russia is setting up a border around the Ukraine to take it over. All right. It says Lynch said he spoke to many draft-eligible Ukrainians who have received mobilization letters from the government, which he called a pretty serious step. Congress this week will likely vote on granting a loan guarantee to the Ukrainian government and will discuss the potential for providing the country with non-lethal aid such as military uniforms and boots. So they're gonna send more troops over there. It says acknowledging the need to tread lightly, Lynch referred to World War I and how one thing after another caused the United States to stumble into the conflict. Next thing you know, this is in quotes, this is from Lynch, it says, next thing you know, 30 million had perished over 4 years of war, and we don't want that to happen. So we have to pay attention here, he said. In Afghanistan, the delegation met with President Hamid Karzai to discuss a final bilateral agreement allowing some American troops to remain in the country beyond 2014. There are approximately 34,000 American troops still in Afghanistan, with 10,000 more expected to pull out by August. With the country's existing agreement set to expire next year, Karzai has failed to sign a new agreement, which would make American troops subjects to Afghan tribal law after the deal expires, Lynch said. We could not allow them to be subject to rules that are not clear-cut at all, he said. So if Karzai continues to refuse, it's recommended that we pull everyone out. The visit to Israel included meetings with President Shimon Peres and Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu, as well as with Palestinian leaders in Ramallah and the West Bank. So as you can see, as I said last time the last article, the tensions in this world war are increasing. So now it's time for us to pray for faith. It's time for us to pray for understanding and ask the Lord to protect us in these coming times, man. Because it's gonna be hell out here. It's gonna be hell out here in these last days, and you gotta. The only way you will make it through is through Yahweh B'Shem Yahweh Shai. So you have to make sure that you ask Him to increase you. All right, so that's the end of that article. Until the next time, I'll say shalom.